Hey everybody, Foley here. Welcome to the weekly news recap for the 29th of September to the 5th of October 2025. Okay, so we're going to start with probably what the biggest news of this week is that the Xbox Game Pass pricing is changing, and of course it's not going to be made cheaper, it's going to be made more expensive. So Microsoft is making more large-scale changes to Xbox Game Pass, including price increases, tier changes that remove some of the current plans. So Xbox Game Pass will now have Essential, Premium, and Ultimate plans. So essentially, Xbox Game Pass Core is going to become Essential, and Xbox Game Pass Standard will become Premium, and Ultimate will stay as Ultimate. But they're not just changing the names of the tiers, they're kind of changing what benefits you'll get from any of those tiers. So Essential and Premium price is staying the same, so that's a $10 and $15 respectively. Game Pass Ultimate, though, is having another $10 thrown on top. So it's going up by 50%. It's going from $20 to $30. If you're on PC Game Pass, you're going from $12 to $16.50. So not as big a jump, but as we'll see in a minute, you're basically getting nothing for more expensive tiers. So this is kind of the breakdown now. Essential 50 plus games. Doesn't say where the cap on that is, because later on you see 200 plus games, 400 plus games. It's like, where's the break point? 50 plus and 200 plus are the same, right? There's no cap on it. Well, they don't mention a cap. There is, of course, a cap, but they don't mention it anyway. Unlimited cloud gaming. Great, thanks. Have a laggy fucking mess. Love it. In-game benefits, which is stuff like skins, that kind of thing. Console multiplayer, which you already have with any Game Pass subscription, or games with gold, or whatever it used to be called, the online tax, essentially, that every console has. And then whatever those rewards things are, but they're usually nothing to write home about. Premium 200 plus games. New Xbox published games within a year of launch. So anything from Xbox's first party studios, you'll get within a year of launch, not on the day as it's supposed to be, day of. Now it's within a year, except, you can see there's an asterisk there, except Call of Duty. And the exception isn't that you'll get Call of Duty day one. The exception is that Call of Duty is not part of the premium tier ever. That's what that asterisk is. And then, of course, unlimited cloud gaming. Cool, laggy piece of shit with shorter wait times. Okay, I'm not in the queue as long for the laggy piece of shit. Otherwise, it's the same skins, what have you, access to multiplayer in general, and a little bit more of the shitty rewards. Great. Game Pass Ultimate, the one that's probably gotten the worst of this, because it's gone up another tenner. 75 plus day one games a year. Doesn't say what kind of games. Doesn't say if they're like the big AAA blockbusters, if they're indies, anything like that. And of course, if Xbox keeps canceling fucking games, are they still going to be able to make good on the 75 plus? Is 75 the minimum? Are they going to hold to that? What happens if they only get 74 games on their platform? Of course, nobody will hold them to account on that, but whatever. Including all Xbox published games day one, so that does include Call of Duty, and you don't have to wait a year, or within a year, rather, it's day one. Includes Ubisoft Plus Classics, EA Play, and Fortnite Crew, whatever the fuck Fortnite Crew is. Apparently there's a subscription to Fortnite that I was not aware of. Anyway, unlimited cloud gaming, again, with our laggy garbage, with even short wait times, and the other stuff as well. So really the only additions you are getting to Ultimate is the Ubisoft Classics, EA Play, and Fortnite Crew. And I think EA Play was already there, so it's Ubisoft Classics and Fortnite Crew. Fortnite Crew is currently $12 a month, something like that. Ubisoft Classics, I think, is like $8 a month. And Ubisoft Classics is like very classic. Like, I think the most recent game is Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which PS3? No, PS4. Yeah, PS4 ish. Early P. No, hang on. Yeah, no, I'm right. Yeah, PS4. Anyway, so positive changes for everyone is that Xbox Cloud Gaming will be available in all tiers. Whoop-de-doo. Doesn't fucking work outside of extremely good internet areas. Ubisoft Plus Classics, as we talked about, it's basically Ubisoft's back catalogue from not very recently, we'll say. Then Fortnite Crew, which is down there, is $12 a month. I don't actually know what Fortnite Crew is. Though I do get the impression that if you're into Fortnite as much or enough for a free-to-play game, that you would still pay for the subscription. I never swapped over to the main. Sorry. If you're into Fortnite that much, are you really playing anything else on Game Pass? Like, would you even be arsed putting in all of the time you need to put into Call of Duty? That kind of stuff. PC Game Pass members will also get Ubisoft Plus Classics access, as we already said. Or sorry, the PC ones get the Ubisoft thing. Although it's not mentioned if they get the Fortnite thing. I'm not sure they do. Anyway, as kind of pointed out, Xbox first-party titles coming within a year of launch. Within a year doesn't say, is that 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, 11 months. But not Call of Duty for the premium tier, like ever. It'll never be part of it, and we'll get to a reason why that's the case. Changes to Xbox Game Pass come just weeks after Microsoft revealed that it was once again raising the price of the Xbox console itself. So Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S, as we pointed out 2 weeks ago, had pretty hefty price increase. Ordinarily, at this stage in a console life cycle, you would see a decrease in the price, so you can get more people to buy it, because at this point, all the people who are going to buy it at that price point have bought it. So you're going to lower the price point so you can get a few more people in. And generally, manufacturing costs should have also come down. You should have been having new versions of the console. Sony have already done it with the PS5. The new PS5 Slim is using cheaper components. It's got a smaller hard drive, a bunch of other things, but has the same price, which they forgot the other part, whereas you're supposed to lower the price too. Anyway, as you can imagine, that was not received particularly well by people on the Xbox Ultimate tier in particular. So the enshittification of Game Pass is here. This is by Ethan Gack for Kotaku. If you are not familiar with the term enshittification, you are probably familiar with its effects. So enshittification is something that came from Cory Doctorow, and it basically describes the pattern of any kind of company that provides a service or a product that is also publicly traded. And the way it works is they provide the product or the service. That's at the beginning. Everybody likes it. People are paying money for it. It's doing really well. But they need growth. Right? Because it's capitalism, and capitalism is cancer, and the only thing that grows forever is cancer and capitalism, I guess. So they need more money, but they've already, they're providing the service. They can't really do much. So what if we just made it a little bit better and people might pay more money for it? No, that's too hard. Let's instead increase the price of it, because now everyone's dependent on this product, and not really make it any better. In fact, we're going to make it worse by carving out things that people like. So you'll see things like some subscription services throwing ads in for ad-supported stuff, and also increasing the pricing. You'll see like food companies going from having 10 in a pack to 8 in a pack now instead, but the same price kind of thing. And then when that stops working, then they start gouging the shareholders as well. Now, Xbox hasn't quite gotten to that point, but it's getting there. And the way that works is they start doing stock buybacks, but it only goes to the upper management tier. It only goes to C-suite kind of thing. It doesn't actually increase the share price. And then looking to kind of sell the company so that C-suite gets a big payday and the shareholders don't really get much out of it. Maybe. Anyway, you can probably look it up for a better description, but that's kind of the general idea. Shrinkflation is another way to look at it. It's a similar kind of concept. Anyway, so Game Pass, once hailed as the best deal in gaming, has now seen a 50% price hike this week, which feels like it's death knell, if not for the subscription itself, then for the perception that the company is trying to meaningfully compete by rewarding its longtime fans. So there is kind of the idea that the whole point of Game Pass was that they couldn't necessarily compete with Nintendo for Nintendo games, because nobody can compete with Nintendo for Nintendo games because they're their games. And then Sony pretty handily trounced Microsoft in with the PS4 because they leaned pretty heavily on, to be honest, on the indie scene and on the third-party scene, getting the console out to people who really wanted it. And then also the Xbox One had that unfortunate always online thing that they did eventually roll back on, but it definitely hurt sales for a very long time. So they were pretty much on the back foot. And it was some kind of way coming into the PS5 because the PS5 was looking like it was going to be pretty good as well. It wasn't going to be a PS3 thing. You know, it looked like it was going to be a pretty solid console. It's probably going to be continuing Sony's effective first place in the console market, and that has borne out. Sony is effectively first place. So Game Pass was meant to be some kind of way to combat that. And at the time when it was put out, it was considered a pretty good deal. You know, you get every game that Xbox puts out day one. And then Microsoft were acquiring a bunch of studios. There was more games that you were going to get day one, as well as like a big back catalog of games and what have you. And it did also prompt Sony to make their own version, like PlayStation Plus Extra, PlayStation Plus, the PlayStation Plus catalog was a reaction to Game Pass, effectively. But now that it's seen 2, I think, price hikes at this point, and both of them after acquiring Activision, this will be notable that after the Activision acquisition, that's when Game Pass started going up. And that's also when the Xbox console prices started going up, etc. Now, this could be coincidence, you know, causality and correlation and so on, but I think we'll see in a second that there's a reason why, and it has mostly to do with Call of Duty. But anyway, so Ethan Gach here argues that the shift to the inshitification of Game Pass began in 2022 when Phil Spencer was talking to the Wall Street Journal at one of their conferences, and he basically said that we've held the price on our console and we've held price on games in our subscriptions, basically saying that they haven't changed the price. How nice of them. In 2022, when they could have easily done it because there was a lot of money flowing into games at the time, and they could have arguably done it and got away with it because people were spending a lot more money on home entertainment effectively. I don't think we'll be able to do that forever. I do think at some point we'll have to raise some prices on certain things, but going into this holiday, 2022, we thought it was really important that we maintain the prices we have. Why? Basically because we are somewhat legally required to do so, as we'll see in a second. Anyway, however, Game Pass as an overall part of our content and services revenue is probably 15%. I think this was a later interview with Phil Spencer. So this is coming from a time when Game Pass was like lauded by Xbox for a long time. It was like part and parcel with a lot of their marketing. I was like, here's this game that's coming out soon. Oh, and get it at day one on Game Pass. Like they were talking about Game Pass all the time, you know, trying to get as many people as possible to buy into it. And then some of the messaging coming from Phil Spencer to investors, in particular to financial people, that kind of thing. Like you wouldn't hear this stuff at Gamescom or like Tokyo Game Show or any of that kind of anything facing the consumer, the customer. You wouldn't hear this. This is people who are the money people, effectively. So 15% is its overall service revenue coming just from Game Pass, which is not really enough. And also, it feels like we've pretty much hit the plateau. I don't think we have a future where we're seeing 50 to 70% of our revenue coming from just the subscriptions. We've seen incredible growth on PC and on console, but this growth is also slowing. And at some point, you've reached a point. At some point, you've reached everybody on console that wants to subscribe. And at that point, you lower the price to get more people in. You've got the people who are cool with paying this price. Then you lower it a bit and you get more people. And you lower it further and you get more people. And you go like down to free. Everybody play. That's why Fortnite is so fucking popular. Anyway. So clearly that has happened. They're not getting enough people in. And now at this point, either they can't afford to go cheaper to get more people in, or they don't want to, which is the way I'm looking at it, because Microsoft aren't exactly hurting for money. You know, they could drop the price. Anyway, 3 years later from that talk, $70 billion in acquisitions, and like 90% of that is just Activision. Weighing on Microsoft's gaming division, Microsoft has now doubled the price of Game Pass in the last 2 years, has seen 2 hikes to its consoles, and has flirted with the idea of releasing an $80 game, which is going to be The Outer Worlds 2. They did roll back on that, but they had plans for Outer Worlds 2 to be their first $80 game, and you can imagine rolling on from that, more of them would be. Although, was Indiana Jones not $80? I feel like it was. Maybe it was the deluxe edition that was $80? I don't know. Anyway, it has also laid off hundreds of developers, closed studios, and cancelled some of its biggest games. So some of the games that should have been, or would have been, enticement for Game Pass. You know, Day One, Perfect Dark. Day One, Contraband. Day One, Everwild. Day One, whatever. You know, any of these kind of games. Day One, whatever the Elder Scrolls guys were working on. I don't know. But those games aren't happening now. And those studios arguably didn't have another game they were working on. So how long is it going to be before the Day One on Game Pass is like 4 games a year? Now, they say 75 plus, but that's third party. We're talking specifically first party Xbox Studios. You know, Obsidian have Grounded 2, and they have their other Clockwork game. Forget what it's called. Wait, is that them? Might be a different developer. Fable. Whenever it fucking comes out, I don't know. Forza, I suppose, and then obviously Call of Duty. Anyway, so Game Pass Ultimate's current price point puts it higher than basically every other subscription out there, and not just in video game land. We're talking like TV subscriptions, Netflix, Disney Plus, that kind of thing. It's way more than all of them. Pointed out here is that Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN all bundled together are about the same amount. So that's 3 subscription services less than Game Pass. So it's pointed out here that for the price tag and for the increase in the price tag is that you're getting very, very little in return. You're getting Hogwarts Legacy, which is 2 years old, 3 years old now, maybe. And if you're not into Hogwarts or you're not into Harry Potter, you don't give a shit. Old Assassin's Creed games, as it's pointed out here. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is the newest one. It does go all the way back to Assassin's Creed 1 and all the spin-offs and so on. But anything from Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, Shadows, none of those are included. And Fortnite skins. Again, I feel like if you're already playing Fortnite, you probably don't have much use for Game Pass. You know, if you're so interested and so invested in Fortnite, then do you give a shit about Game Pass at that point? This is not the basis for a premium flagship subscription service. So what's the latest Game Pass overhaul is really about is extracting a premium from existing customers for day one access to Call of Duty, which is shitification. It's stage 1. Extract more money from your existing customers for basically the same product. So all you're really getting from Game Pass Ultimate is you get Call of Duty Day One, which you already had. That was already something you were getting from Game Pass Ultimate. So you're now paying an extra $10 to continue to have Call of Duty Day One. Okay. So Microsoft did test this last year when they said they hiked the price of Game Pass. You may recall this. They hiked the price of Game Pass just before Call of Duty Black Ops was going to come out. They added an extra $3 on top of it, and $1, I think, to what used to be called Standard. And they also removed the Day One access thing to Standard, you may recall. And that hasn't come back. Day One was now exclusively just for the Ultimate tier. It was not for the Standard or the Premium tier anymore. And that has basically not really changed. First party games are still coming to Standard, Premium, whatever, for the same price, but not Call of Duty specifically. And again, as I said, we'll get to it. There's a reason why not Call. You can probably already guess money, but there's a reason why. The picture on PC is even more dire. It's going from $12 to $16.50 with no additional change. It just costs more money. That's it. That's just a price hike. There's no change. There's no additional games. There's no additional anything. Yeah, fine. You still have Call of Duty, but whatever. So it's in exchange for nothing except the ability to continue playing Call of Duty, the new one, each year without having to pay for it. I would be curious if they'll get rid of like the monthly charge and if it'll just become like a 3-monthly, 6-monthly thing. Because if you look at it on PC, it's like you're paying $16.50 to have Call of Duty for a month. Now, if it's something that you play all the time, arguable, you might want to play more for it. But at that point, it's $16.50 times 12. I'm not doing maths. It's too late. But Call of Duty doesn't cost that much. It would be cheaper to just buy the game at that point. So why are you bothering? Also, you don't have you need to have a subscription if you're playing on console because you need it for multiplayer, which is now 120 euros a year or $120 a year subscription to do multiplayer. Now, this isn't just harping on Xbox. Sony do it as well. For PlayStation, Nintendo do it as well. The only place where you don't have to play for online multiplayer is PC, which I guess is why arguably it's a cheaper price. But I'm sure Microsoft are a bit miffed that they can't charge for it. Anyway, going into some of the numbers, Microsoft hasn't announced a new Game Pass subscriber numbers in over a year, so chances are they did used to every year. Yearly earnings, they would say, here's how much it's grown by, here's how many new subscribers we've gotten, here are the total subscriber numbers, and so on. And typically, if they don't talk about those numbers, it's because they're not good. Usually, now we don't know that. We don't know that for definite, but chances are if they're not, crowing about it and beating their chest about how great Game Pass is, it's because it's not doing well. Anyway, instead of growing Game Pass revenue by growing the program, which arguably is, you make the product more interesting to get more people in to pay more money for it. So instead of growing Game Pass revenue by growing the program, it will make the number go up by just getting its highest rollers to spend more time at the tables. So you're just getting the people who already pay the most to pay more. That's what's happening here. It is sort of trying to take some cues from Sony here. So here's an interesting life-to-date spending between the PS4 and the PS5. You'll note spending has gone up, but kind of more interestingly is that most of the spending increases are in content add-ons and services. So content add-ons is things like skins. So this is like people buying V-Bucks through the PlayStation Store or buying Call of Duty skins through the PlayStation Store, or buying any kind of additional thing that isn't specifically no, I mean DLC would be included in this, actually, yeah. So, but it is mostly the live service microtransaction stuff. And then services is PlayStation Plus, basically. I don't know what this... I guess this is like overall 26%. And then this is an increase in peripherals, which looking at the bars, it doesn't look like it's an increase. It sure looks like it's smaller. But okay, apparently that represents plus 34. It sure doesn't fucking look like it, but okay. Increase in services, increase in content. Like, these are the two, like, big ones. It's also why Sony don't really make new fucking games anymore, because they're just looking at this and they make more money doing that. As you can see, because they actually make less money from just selling games. They make... Sorry, it's not that they make less money. It's that they're seeing more growth in selling add-ons to games rather than the game itself. And I guess Game Pass are kind of going for that kind of thing, noticing that the most dedicated PS5 players keep spending more and more, and that there's a little bit of data you need to keep in mind here, and it is that more people own PlayStation 5s as well. So that there is a case here of like critical mass and that there are more players playing on PS5, so PS5 would get more spending, therefore. It doesn't necessarily carry over that you should be seeing the same proportionate thing on Xbox, but I guess Microsoft does think it should be seeing it anyway. Microsoft has clearly given up on growing its own share of the gamer pie. This is kind of alluding to the fact that they've increased the price of the console. They have cancelled a bunch of their exclusives. There are even fewer exclusives than ever before, and now they're jacking up the price of the subscription. So clearly they're trying to like milk as much as they can from their most loyal customers right now before they just maybe exit the hardware market in general. There is the rumor that there won't be an Xbox whatever next generation. It is a rumor, and it currently, I think Microsoft are of the position that it's just scaremongering, I guess. Like, they have made no official notice that they're not going to make whatever the next Xbox is. Now, what would you even call it? They've used such weird fucking names for their console. Xbox something, I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, I thought this was kind of an interesting thing to point out. So in thinking about like how much money it costs, so $360 a year. That's if you go by the new pricing for Game Pass Ultimate on console. You could buy the new Black Ops, Gears of War, Fable, Forza Horizon 6, all of the exclusives that are on the way that we know of, and still have enough to pay for the multiplayer tax on console as well. If you prefer to just look at the indie side of things, you could buy so many indies. So many indies for $360. Holy shit. And a lot of them are on sale pretty often. Like, if that's all you're really interested in, you don't need Game Pass for it. Not at that price. And then, of course, if you are paying, the Fortnite crew thing, and you're already like playing Fortnite daily, and like it's the only thing you're fucking playing, why do you need any other game? What is the draw for having your Fortnite crew subscription rolled into Game Pass? Like, as far as I'm aware, Fortnite is exempt from the multiplayer tax. I think all free-to-play games are exempt from it. So anyway, speaking to other like people in the industry, analysts and stuff like this. So Daniel Ahmad from Nico Partners. The big question going forward is if Game Pass can be a sustainable product off console, and how best they can reach this audience. This is the idea of Xbox's Play Anywhere thing, where you could have Game Pass on your phone, have it on your tablet, on your TV, in your car, wherever, and they would just stream the game to you. And if they can make that subscription model sustainable to an audience that, wouldn't typically, we're talking about people who don't own a console and don't own a gaming PC kind of thing. Anyway, at the very least, that's going to require a lower entry cost, the essential tier and experimentation with cloud-only, ad-supported, or mobile-first offerings. Now, he's saying that now, and there is a rumor that, again, more rumors from Xbox, is that they are planning the cloud gaming laggy shit, but making it an ad-supported laggy piece of shit. Cool. But I mean, that is kind of the thing they're looking at. You kind of do need a free tier in some cases to get buy-in from the greater, not hardcore gamer. And then this other thing, which I thought is like, people should be a little more concerned about this one if it's actually true. But the top 10% of income earners now account for almost 50% of consumer spending. So like, why is everybody okay with, as pointed out here, like game pads that are like $200 things for like the PlayStation Edge, $150 collector's editions, the Pro consoles, prices just going up and so on. And it's because the top 10% of income earners now account for nearly 50% of consumer spending. So it's the people with all of the money are driving the prices up, because they know, people selling it know that they have the money for it. And it is pricing people out. We talked about this a while ago now, that increasing the prices of all these things just prices people out of the market. And if you're going to... These people won't be very happy in their multiplayer games when it's just the 10% of them playing it. Anyway... fewer people are accounting for a larger share of total spending on games, at least in the US, and it's arguable that it's similar in other places. But yeah, that's kind of the thing, in that why they're comfortable with being able to put those prices up is that the whales are there. And not only are the whales there, they're responsible for most of the spending. Anyway, another way to look into how well received the price hike was is that Microsoft's webpage for subscriptions was briefly overloaded after the announcement. This is from people trying to cancel it. And searches for how to cancel are at like an all-time peak, like ridiculous level. So yeah, probably not received particularly well. Anyway, coming back to the stuff about Call of Duty. So according to Microsoft, Call of Duty, they lost Call of Duty sales to the tune of about $300 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but that's fucking nothing to Microsoft. So I don't know why they're making such a big deal out of it, but apparently this is the reason for the big change, or the reason why Call of Duty is not included in the middle tier anymore. So Microsoft's decision to put Call of Duty on Game Pass has costed hundreds of millions of dollars, allegedly. So this is coming from a deal, coming from an interview with Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who was talking to a lot of people who work at Microsoft or used to work at Microsoft, and they're talking about the Activision deal, the Game Pass hike, and a bunch of other things. But in particular, they were talking about how putting Call of Duty on Game Pass meant they didn't get, obviously, people buying the game then in that case. So last year, in total, Xbox gave up around $300 million in sales of Call of Duty on console and PC. So reports were out that Black Ops 6 sold well. However, 86% of those sales came from PlayStation. We've talked about it before, but remember on the last one, where is it? PS5 players, no, it's this one. PS5 players spend a lot of money, right? So 86% of Black Ops 6's sales came from PlayStation specifically, and the assumption then is that everyone else who was playing it on Microsoft, or the vast majority of people who were playing it on Xbox or PC, were doing it through the Game Pass. Interviewees that Bloomberg talked to said that Game Pass was a detriment to Microsoft, that it costs more money than it brings in. So apparently the loss of $300 million to Microsoft was a huge hit. Citation needed? Like, how much is Microsoft just shoveling into generative AI? Billions? I really feel like this isn't a massive deal. And also, I do kind of take issue with calling this a loss of $300 million, because they didn't lose the money. Like, people still paid the subscription for Game Pass. They still got that money out of it. They chose to put it on Game Pass. They made the opportunity cost, if you like. We mightn't make as much money if we don't put it on Game Pass, but we'll get everybody to pay full price for it, or as many people as we can, versus more people into Game Pass, more recurring subscriptions, more people, leaving the auto renew on and maybe paying. I mean, if everybody who bought Game Pass played Call of Duty Black Ops 6 for 4 months, off and on, over time, effectively let the Game Pass subscription renew itself 4 times, what have you, they made their money back. And considering how fucking grindy Call of Duty is, they probably did. So I kind of take issue with the idea that they lost 300 million, but Microsoft seemed to have taken that way because they've taken Game Pass off, or taken Call of Duty off the mid-tier of the Game Pass. So this is the last thing, and this is sort of a I told you so from Lina Khan. So Lina Khan was chair of the Federal Trade Commission, the US, from 2021 to the beginning of this year. You look up those years, you can probably figure out what happened. Anyway, in March, so she was overseeing the Microsoft Activision deal. In March 2023, Microsoft told the court at the time, this was during the merger process, that Game Pass prices would not increase as a result of its Activision Blizzard acquisition. And at the time, Lina Khan called bullshit, I called bullshit, and so many other people fucking called bullshit. You probably called bullshit, but anyway. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision has been followed by significant price hikes and layoffs, harming both gamers and developers. This is Lina Khan saying in a Blue Sky post, I think. Nope, Twitter. Anyway. As we've seen across sectors, increasing market consolidation and increasing prices often go hand in hand. As dominant firms become too big to care, which is a term I do not like looking at. Anyway, they can make things worse for their customers without having to worry about the consequences. Because, hey, if you have an Xbox, the only way you can get online is to buy our subscription. And if you want to play Call of Duty, you got to pay for the most expensive subscription. Or you get a PlayStation. But Sony jacked up the price on that too. Okay, you can get a gaming PC. GPUs are more expensive than they've ever been. Is Call of Duty on Nintendo? Yeah, but it's shit. You're kind of fucked either way. Anyway, moving on. So, some better news. So the Horror Game Awards had their Halloween showcase, but not awards. I don't know, it was a weirdly named event. So they showed off a bunch of spooky, scary games. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. Anyway, so this is Vampire Huntress, Lament of the Sun, with a very big personalities on this character. But what I liked about it is that it's kind of got like the old school fixed camera angle, Resident Evil survival horror thing. And you're going to see me say this a lot on a lot of the games they showed off, because hey, they're getting a bit of a resurgence, as it turns out. Anyway, I kind of like the vibe of it, and we've talked about this before. I like vampires, but you don't really see many of them in video games. So I'm kind of enjoying this, and I'm kind of like, yes, she's like heavily sexualized or whatever, but I kind of like the vibe of heavily sexualized. No, I like the vibe of this kind of gothic vampire hunting thing. I kind of like the idea of it. We'll skip ahead because there's a little bit of combat later on. And it's kind of interesting because it's way faster paced for a survival horror than you might expect. So you can see like this vampire monster, I assume it's a vampire, can dodge and move really quickly, but so can your character. So, there's a little bit more, as opposed to the usual Resident Evil way, the old school Resident Evil way of fighting, which was stand in place and shoot and hope they die before they get to you. That was the normal way of doing it. Like, they're clearly going for like a grindhouse maybe even Italian horror vibes, like just blood everywhere and also heavily sexualized characters. Um, that was the style at the time. Anyway, I don't think vast majority of these games don't have release dates. Anyway, moving on. Parasensor. I'm kind of like looking at this because there's not a ton of gameplay showing off, and I think it does have a bit of the survival horror element to it. But mostly I'm looking at it because the art style is really nice and the animations are really nice as well. But as for what kind of game it is, not entirely sure. I think there is some sort of infection, as you can see from that guy, in the zone you are in. You are trying to effectively live in there while also doing like investigative journalism to try to figure out what's actually going on in the zone. And I guess you get infected along the way. But yeah, there's not a whole lot about the story, but as I said, the art style, the art direction, and that that key art is really nice. Echograph's kind of an interesting one. So it is Fatal Frame. So it is ghosts, and you take a picture of them and they go away. They don't like to take selfies, I guess. But it's also got like isometric viewpoint, which is kind of interesting. It's not really. I guess you don't really see too many like isometric survival horrors. It's really just Signalis that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are probably more. And you certainly don't see too many like camera-based ones. It's pretty much just Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame had a lot of different names. If you're yelling at me that no, it's also this game, it's just chances are that's Fatal Frame. It just has a different name. I think if there's one thing I'm not mad about for Echograph is its title. Like this title just doesn't look great. I think they should work on it. Otherwise, I'm intrigued. The Bagman, I think the Bagman has been shown off before, but I didn't remember it. So I'm just going to pretend this is the first time I've seen it. So the Bagman is kind of like it's kind of like the old Clock Tower game. So it's kind of like a side-scrolling kind of survival horror type thing, but it's also got a lot of fuck you deaths to it. It's like you just make a decision and it kills you for no reason. It's just, trial and error of how it works out. What's a little different about the Bagman is that you can also like talk to your friends who are in the house with you and like get them to distract this monster and that kind of thing. Get them to go to different locations, get them to pick up things for you. And, this is like a little bit of a strategy, but also fuck you for making the wrong decision. They can die really easily kind of thing. And the Bagman, why it's called the Bagman, you'll see they've cut away to him a couple of times. There's like this scary guy who they open the door to, and he has a horrible bag, basically. I think there's a good show. Okay, well, there's the bag. Anyway, I don't think it had a release date. No, that's the developer. No, just wishlist. Okay. A game I probably won't play, but it sure is a very funny concept. So this is FIFA 98. So FIFA, but with monster enemies. Like it clearly has some kind of storyline to it, and then it's also a football game. It's just very dumb. It's something I will point out, like top left corner, if you keep a look at the timer on all of these matches, they're all very early in the match. So I'm kind of curious, like how long did these matches even last? Like I know the FIFA games, the football games are like an actual real football game is like 45 minutes per half kind of thing, but it's simulated. The timer is way faster on a video game because you're not going to sit there for 90 minutes playing it. But it doesn't look like the timer is actually like sped up or anything. So I have a feeling the matches themselves are probably short, or it's until every player is dead, something like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a funny concept anyway. As for what the storyline is, I've no idea. But I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Psycho Dead, I think we actually have seen before, but this is actually just showing off a bit of gameplay, and it looks rough. It does. There's no really getting around that. It does look kind of rough and kind of janky. But I do kind of like the idea behind it, and I like the presentation. And I don't think we really do enough sci-fi survival horror too much. And you're gonna say that, and you're gonna name a bunch of games at me, and it's like I'm not gonna say we don't do it. I just don't think we do enough of it. Anyway, so Psycho Dead has a little bit of, as you can see, kind of over the shoulder Resident Evil stuff to it. There's a little bit of Dead Space to it, and the Psycho part of it is that you do have like psycho power. You know, you have like telekinesis and this kind of stuff, which is not really shown off particularly well in this trailer, but you do have psychokinetic powers. You showed off a little bit of it there. But yes, the game does look rough. So there is like large amount of concern that this will be a janky mess when it actually releases. And we have Descendant of Night, which is also a vampire game, which I didn't figure out until like halfway through the trailer. They just dropped vampire in there. But kind of funnily, it's sort of like a 90s action over the top kind of thing. So it's doing the same like intro to Resident Evil 1, which is rescue mission effectively. You know, your friends have gone missing, you're being choppered into a remote area out in the mountains. But the guy talking is very much like, I don't do that kind of job anymore. You know, this kind of stuff. He's very like grizzled and combative and stuff. But then also vampires. Just out of nowhere. It's just very funny. Yeah, but gameplay wise, I think it is like a fixed camera angle kind of thing. Fixed camera angle survival horror type deal. But I just like the vibe of it, I guess. And then last one we're looking at is Confined Leaving OKB 134. That's you guys need to work on that title. And I'm kind of a bit mixed on this because I was all for it when it looked like it was just a spooky walking simulator. Yeah, I was all for that. I really liked Soma when you turned off the monsters. I feel like Soma was a much better game when you turned off the monsters. But at the end of the trailer, it's determined that there is, in fact, something stalking you in the bunker. So that's a bit shit. I do like that it has a VR mode. So if it makes its way to PSVR 2, that'd be good, because there's really very little on the platform right now. But yeah, so I remember I didn't even tell you what the fucking game was about. You're locked in a bunker at the beginning. You can see the guy at the start. There's like a party thing, and it does, and I think he drugs you, and you wake up in this bunker. So yeah, so I was kind of all for it when it seemed like it was a spooky escape room kind of thing. But yeah, if it's also going to be a cat and mouse Outlast Amnesia deal, no, fuck off. Anyway, outside of the showcase, we had a couple of other games. So there was also PC Gaming Show Tokyo Edition. So this is Earth Must Die. This is a really old school point and click game, which I think has some really fun like Saturday morning cartoon vibes to it. But probably the bigger draw is that the cast is just full of comedians. Like almost everybody I think they mention on it is a well-known comedian in some cases, or Ben Starr, who is himself funny, but I don't think he's necessarily classed as a comedian. And I think the gist of it is your character is meant to like inherit some sort of kingdom, alien kingdom, and you're passed over for somebody else, and you find that that's a bit, that's not on. It's got a little bit of Megamind to it, I think. Anyway, that's Earth Must Die. Again, I don't think it had a release date or anything. Yeah, it's just a wishlist deal. And Hell Reaper. So Hell Reaper's a pretty, I do have a soft spot for hack and slashes that are also 2D. It's just a thing. I like them. What can I say? I'm not good at them, but I like them. Anyway, so Hell Reapers is another one, basically. I think it looks quite pretty, despite it being quite clearly like a horror vibe to it, but there's lots of flashy colors, and it looks like you have a lot of different abilities, and it looks like it feels good when you kill guys, and I don't know what else you need. So yeah, I a little bit put off by some of the animation because it does look like it is over animated in some cases, so kind of Like the art style kind of gives it more of like a painterly quality to it, but the animations kind of give away that it's clearly 3D models. So I don't really know how I feel about that. But I don't know. We'll see when the game itself is actually out. Parasite Mutant. So Parasite Mutant's an interesting one because it's clearly somebody who's gotten sick of Square Enix not making Parasite Eve. Basically, and they went, fuck it, I'll do it myself. So they just made Parasite Eve, pretty much. I don't know what else to say about it. Even the main character looks a lot like the main character from the first Parasite, and both Parasite Eves. Never played the third one. Yeah, the gameplay is very similar. It's just Parasite, which is fine because Square Enix are clearly not doing anything with it. So yeah, more of that, please. Does it have a release date or a wish listy or when anything? I think it's just a wish list job. It doesn't even say wish list. Even the title looks very like Parasite Eve. Anyway, Frictional's next project. So Frictional, you might better know as the guys behind Amnesia and Soma, as I was talking about earlier. So this is their next game, which is currently titled Hotel Samsara. From the press release, at least, they say that it's a new thing. So it's not a sequel to Amnesia or a sequel to Soma. However, there are some indications that it might still be a sequel to Soma, or at least maybe in the same universe. Soma itself was recently updated to add just an email at the beginning of the game, like way at the beginning of the game. You can check your character's emails. And there wasn't this one there before, and it was an invitation to Hotel Samsara. So that could just be an Easter egg, or it could be alluding that maybe it's a sequel to Soma and they just don't want to say that. Or maybe it genuinely is something new and it's just a fun little Easter egg they decided to put in. Anyway. And this last one, kind of newly announced game, this is Crash Out Crew. This is by Aggro Crab. And Aggro Crab also made Peak, which also only came out this year. So they're putting in work, really. And to be fair, Peak is a co-development thing. Aggro Crab aren't making it all by themselves. They're making it in partnership with another development studio, but I think this one is just them. Anyway, from the looks of Crash Out Crew, it's Overcooked or Moving Out or any of those kind of things, but you're in forklifts and in shenanigans. You know, like this is the kind of, what do they call it? Friendship slop, or whatever that kind of thing is. And like that's kind of part of the fun of Overcooked. Sure, there's the element of like gold starring everything or whatever, but a lot of the fun of Overcooked is just everything going wrong. It's whatever. Anyway, Crash Out Crew does have a demo coming soon, but I don't believe it has a release date or anything like that. Okay, then I think there's worse news after this. So Pillars of Eternity 2 and more pulled from stores after Unity reveals years-old security exploits. So good stuff coming out of Unity. Anyway, so Obsidian pulled Pillars of Eternity 2. They also pulled Pentiment and a couple of other games, Grounded, I think, as well. Because Unity revealed to developers that there has been a security flaw since 2017. Early 2017, 2017.1 version of Unity. The company behind it is now urging developers to update their games to avoid any issues. So if you do have, well, one, if you're a developer and this is the first you're hearing of it, you might want to patch your game. But also you may have seen some of your games might have gotten hotfixes and stuff like that. Anyway, a security vulnerability was identified that affects games and applications built on Unity versions 2017.1 and later. So that's up to present day. That's not good. For Android, Windows, Linux, Mac, everything that Unity runs on, basically. There is no evidence of any exploitation of the vulnerability. Of course, they're not going to say if there is. Nor has there been any impact on users or customers. Why'd you bother saying anything then? Because there has been. Anyway, the company has proactively provided fixes that address the vulnerability, and they are already available to all developers. So chances are you just need to update your Unity install and then just issue a patch for your game. That should be the only thing you need to do. So Obsidian took the precaution of taking the games down until they can get the patch worked out, and then they'll put the game back up when the patch is ready. So they've taken down Pillars of Eternity 2, Pentiment, Grounded 2, and Avowed. And the No Rest for the Wicked devs have done something similar. Other developers have also started rolling out updates, so chances are this won't affect you in any way. But if you've been like trying to buy some of these games that are on sale right now, and either I'm not sure if Steam prevents you from playing the game or from buying the game, but not playing it, or whatever way it works. But you may have encountered this issue. Anyway, moving on. Cairn has been delayed into the beginning of next year at some stage. So this was meant to come out early November. So it's now been pushed out to early next year instead. Tough decision was made. They want to make sure it's, very good and everyone enjoys it and so on. They're getting feedback from people who are playing the demo and people are doing playtests. They want to implement them and they just want more time. So, which is fine because there are too many games coming out. So that's fine. Delay yourself as much as you want. And I guess Kingmakers got the same memo because they're also delaying themselves. So Kingmakers gets surprise delay week before release. Unfortunately for this one, it doesn't have a Q1 2026 or anything like that. It's indefinite, which is a bit worrying. Indefinite delays aren't, they're not fun to hear. You would kind of want them to. I guess the case is that they had to make a call soon, and since they didn't have a date ready, they're just gonna have to say indefinite because they don't have one. But I guess we'll see. If they issue a new date relatively soon, maybe it's not a big deal. Anyway, so this Kingmaker, if you're not familiar, it's the bringing like modern guns and going back in time and fighting in medieval sieges and stuff like that. You may have seen it all over social media. It's an incredibly ambitious, uncompromising game, and we don't want to cut any planned features for the sake of getting it out the door earlier. Our goal from the start has been to create something that's nothing like anything else on the market in terms of scale, scope, playability, interactivity, and so on. So yeah, I guess they haven't quite hit the mark that they wanted to hit before they get the game out. And as far as I'm aware, it's releasing into early access anyway. So it's not like the game was going to be like 100% done in the first place. Anyway, some monthly game stuff. So Sony's October monthly games should be going live on Tuesday. They already talked about these as part of State of Play. So this is more of a reminder that Alan Wake 2, Goat Simulator 3, and Cocoon will be playable from the 7th of October. And for the first time, there's something in this monthly thing that I want to play that I don't already own. So I was smart to hold out on Alan Wake 2, I guess. Rather annoyingly, it's a developer that I would actually want to give my money to. So I may just go buy it anyway. Anyway, moving on. Free games over on the Epic Games Store up until Thursday. Firestone Online Idle RPG. It's an idle fucking auto battler thing. I don't know how there's millions of them. And as far as I'm aware, it was free anyway. Like it doesn't normally it has a strike through and has, like the actual price or the original price underneath it, but this one was always free. So that's a bit cheap, Epic. How dare you put a free game in your free games thing? And then what was probably the better draw, Nightingale. So Nightingale is, I think it's been recently retooled pretty heavily, so I don't know if it still plays the same the way it used to. But the idea of it was like a dimension hopping Valheim in some ways, only like Victorian steampunk instead of Vikings. But the idea was that you could hop to different dimensions. Those different dimensions had different physics, different art styles, different layouts. They also had different resources, different enemy types, and you would take those resources from different realms, bring them back to your home realm, and build like your base and your house and stuff like that. And as far as I know, it has changed somewhat since then, but I don't know how exactly. So yeah, I think that was the original intention of the game. I'm not sure if it's now changed to more of a almost story thing, like a linear thing where you just go to realms in order. I don't know. You'll have to check yourselves. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? Well, Sony would really like it if you played Ghost of Yotai, because it's basically the only game they brought out this year. Reviews have been pretty good for it. The criticisms I've seen is that it is Ghost of Tsushima again. I mean, Ghost of Tsushima is a good game, but I think there's somewhat of an expectation that they might have built on it, and it does seem like it is like, I guess the criticism is that it looks more like an evolution of Ghost of Tsushima rather than like a big, like, significant change. Almost like a 1.5 kind of thing. But it is like, it's just as big a game, and it's just as like bombastic. There's some really good set pieces. All that stuff is still there. The main characters are interesting. The storyline is okay, as usual. Sony games. Yeah, you're all gonna say Last of Us at me. I don't think that's a good story. All right. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of really good stories, Digimon Storytime Stranger, also out this week. I know nothing about Digimon, but I really want to play this game because I think it just looks really. It just looks fun, I guess, despite the overarching plot being like the end of the world or something like that. But it still looks like fun, kind of old school JRPGs with almost a Shin Megami Tensei vibe to it in some cases. You're gonna say, though, you don't want to play Ghost of Yotai, though, do you? I was like, no, I do want to play Ghost of Yotai. I also want to play a lot of games. I don't have the time for it. Anyway, yeah, despite not knowing anything about Digimon, I do want to give this a shot because it does look really good. Anyway, Nicktoons The Dice of Destiny is effectively Nicktoons Diablo. So it is dungeon crawler, kind of isometric thing, where you play your favorite Nicktoons characters. My favorites aren't in there. Well, that's because I'm old. Anyway, yeah, from what I've seen, it's a lot of fun, but you know, it's also a licensed Nicktoons thing, so it's not going to be like 100 out of 100 or anything. Anyway. And then Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, which is the remaster / sort of technically a remake of Final Fantasy Tactics because they don't have the old code anymore, so they had to remake the game. So is it a remake? Is it a remaster? Hard to say. Anyway, what I've seen reviews-wise is that like people who played the original game are like, yep, that's the game, all right. But with like some really nice improvements. The voice acting is really good. And I've actually kind of heard, interestingly, people who were initially against the art style change, in that kind of the pixels have become a lot smoother. There's a lot of like rounding in areas that there shouldn't be rounding and stuff like that. That they say that when it is moving in practice, it actually has more of a watercolor painting vibe to it, rather than like 3D pixel kind of thing. Like it gives more like this is a moving painting rather than video game kind of thing to it. And you're probably not going to get that kind of sense because these are like quick edits. But from more like unbroken gameplay, yeah, it actually does kind of give that vibe. I would need to like see it in person on my own screen to really say for definite, but as someone who was also against and is somewhat still against the change in the art style, the smoothing and the nicening and what have you, I want my old chunky pixels. But you still have that. The classic version is also bundled, so if you really want to, you can go back to the old way of playing the game. I'd be curious if the voice acting is included in the classics version, but I have a feeling it isn't. I have a feeling the classic version is there purely for like this is the original one, pretty much. Anyway, unfortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, video game industry. Now, we already talked about the Xbox Game Pass price hike, which I said was probably the biggest news story of the week. But until that happened, I was going to say this was the biggest news story of the week. So we talked about it very briefly when it was a rumor last week that EA were going to be bought out by a private equity group and taken private. And the rumor was that the deal was going to happen or was going to be agreed upon some stage this week. And like literally Monday, 9 a.m., press release. Yeah, it's happening. EA are going to be bought by the private investment fund, which is owned by or run by Saudi Arabia. We have the Silver Lake Equity Group, who are also part of the TikTok US deal. And Jared Kushner's fucking equity group as well. I forget what they're called. Aperture, something like that, I think. For $55 billion. We had $50 billion last week. It's they've added an extra $5 billion for the lulz, I guess. So the original story is just what we were talking about and how some of the people who work in BioWare are like go a little bit with this deal. But that's all from last week when it was still a rumor. Now it's confirmed. So the update is, well, that escalated quickly because he had just put out a story on the 29th of September, which was Monday. And like a couple of minutes, and like an hour later, maybe they had this update going. Anyway, so following rumors over the weekend, EA have confirmed that an investor consortium consisting of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, the equity firm Silver Lake, and Jared Kushner's Affinity, not Aperture, Affinity Partners have acquired the Battlefield 6 publisher in an all-cash asterisk transaction of $55 billion bajillion. This will effectively give them 100% ownership of EA, and they are intending to take it private, so it's going to come off the stock market. All shares will be bought up. Shareholders and C-suite probably are going to get a pretty great payday. The employees, on the other hand, are going to get laid off, I would imagine. Anyway, EA CEO Andrew Wilson will stay on in his position until, you know, he'll do a Bobby Kotick, I imagine, at some point and just disappear to infect another company instead. I think he's on Coca-Cola's board at the moment. Anyway, so EA CEO Andrew Wilson stay on his position. Reminder, he is currently the highest paid CEO in video games now that Bobby is gone. I'm curious who will follow him now after that. Anyway, EA's main headquarters is expected to stay in California. The transaction is expected to close first quarter of 2027. So there's quite a bit of time. It's about a year-ish, year and a bit. In other words, some stage between January and March 2027, all of the pending regulatory approvals and voting by EA shareholders, which I can't imagine they'll say no to because they don't care about EA's lineage, or the vast majority of EA's shareholders don't care about EA's lineage. Anyway, reminder, the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund is like 10% in the publisher anyway. A lot of the stock is owned by the CEO and other members of C-suite. Like, just think of the people who would be voting for this. Regulatory approvals. Did you miss the part where Jared Kushner is involved in it? And who's the US president right now? If you don't remember, Jared Kushner is his son-in-law. So, yeah, this is going through. More than likely. Anyway, so according to press release, this transaction constitutes an equity investment of $36 billion. And I was talking about it last week, and I thought like they wouldn't put up so much of their own money, but they have. They've put up a lot of their own money, which suggests they're expecting a fairly massive return on that investment, which is a bit worrying. And should be worrying for anyone who works in EA. But the even more worrying part is the $20 billion of debt financing committed to solely by JP Morgan Chase. What does this mean? It means the Saudi Investment Fund, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners took out a $20 billion loan from JP Morgan Chase, and they've added their $36 billion on top. But they're not on the hook for paying back that loan. EA is on the hook for paying back that loan, which I feel should be illegal. Really. But again, who's president right now of the US? Right. Anyway, and then the rest of the story is talking about what we were talking about last week, which was that it was still a rumor. So yeah, is this good news or bad news? Now, what do you think? Anyway, EA Saudi deal fallout, junk credit ratings, risky AI bets, and developer fears. So this is kind of a collection of a bunch of news that came out during the week about the EA deal, as people were talking to developers and they were talking to the investors, the ones who were willing to talk and speak about it, and then talking to like credit rating firms and banks and that kind of thing on like, what does this mean, taking a formerly public company private that is now heavily saddled with debt? It's not good, as you might imagine. Anyway, so some inside the company are worried about possible cuts, layoffs, and censorship to come down the line. There's also the talk of downgraded credit ratings, rumors of ramped up AI initiatives, and relative radio silence from the executives. So it's really just Andrew Wilson has talked about it and nobody else. And not many people from the other side, like the investment, the equity firms, not really talking about the deal either. Anyway, so this is coming from Bloomberg, that the S&P Global Ratings group plan to lower EA's credit rating to junk status once the leverage buyout deal is completed. So it's currently sitting at BBB plus, which is in the middle, more or less. Meaning like, if you invest in it, it's like, yeah, it might go up, might go down. Either way, you won't lose much, but you probably won't gain much either. And they're planning to downgrade it to non-investment grade or speculative territory, which is effectively saying, like, don't put your money in this. Once it's been saddled with the $20 billion loan. So why is that a problem? Well, looking into how the loan is being financed. So JP Morgan have made the commitment through its leveraged finance arm and not its private credit strategy, which effectively means they're planning to sell it as debt to other groups, and not looking to take on and hold the debt themselves, basically. So the debt is expected to be single B range, which I don't think it's quite the lowest one, but it might as well be. And it's set to be sold through high yield bonds and leverage loans. Hey, I've heard that somewhere before. Where have I heard that before? Let me throw my mind back to 2008. Anyway, the plan is effectively for JP Morgan to get rid of this loan as fast as possible. Smells like high interest rate debt. Yeah, so effectively this debt, this loan, is going to be subjected to a significant amount of interest. Way more than you might expect. So EA are not only on the hook for the 20 billion loan, they're going to be on the hook for the very high interest that goes on top of it. And they're probably going to be in a position where, and this would be in JP Morgan's best interests, that they can pay the interest. And that's about it. Like, not really having any way to pay off the loan. People who have high student loans would know what that feels like. It's like never being able to make a dent in it. It's just always there. And it is effectively just income for the bank. Anyway, so why having your credit being reduced to junk or to speculative grade? It's so that you can't really get any more investment. Why is that a problem? It's like you can't get investors to put any more money into the group, or they won't want to because it has such a poor rating. You're going to be getting people who are just like really banking on making an incredible return, or idiots. It also means you're going to have trouble getting another loan from another bank. You know, you might find that the high interest rate that JP Morgan is charging is a bit onerous. And you might think, hey, why don't I take like a $22 billion loan from another bank that will give me better interest rate terms and will pay off the loan from JP Morgan or whatever. No, you should never take out a loan to pay another loan. That is silly. At least that's what they tell you, but apparently every billionaire does literally that all the time, and they get away with it because banks just let them do it. Anyway, they won't be allowed. They won't be able to do that because no bank will look at them while their credit rating is so bad. So yeah, they're going to be saddled with this $20 billion loan. The interest rate on it is going to be exorbitant. They're going to have difficulty paying that back. And on top of that, the equity group are putting in $36 billion. They're going to want to see a return on that. And I say putting in, a lot of that is going to go to paying shareholders. It's going to go, a lot of that is going to go to just buying up all of the stock so that they can own 100% of the company. Like, this isn't a 36 billion investment. It's not like all of it is going to the developers to make really good games. That's not what's happening. This is going to shareholders. That's it. And like a nice payday for Andrew Wilson and his friends. Okay, now I may, not being a finance guy, I may have misunderstood what this means potentially, but I think I got the broad strokes of it. Anyway, somewhat better understanding here, though, is that BioWare being on the chopping block, as well as a bunch of other studios, because maybe their political and moral leanings are not in keeping with Jared Kushner and Saudi Arabia. Anyway, going private could free EA from the whims of a stock market based around quarterly earnings reports. However, being saddled with a ton of debt will likely reshape the decades-old gaming company as we know it, and probably not in the way you want it to. EA has an infamous reputation for buying up acclaimed studios with big creative ambitions and eventually gutting them when they fail to live up to the earnings potential of the loot box machines fueling Madden and what used to be FIFA, is now EA Sports. Potentially, younger viewers may not be familiar with EA's history, but EA have a very, very strong and shitty history of buying really good studios, making them make games they don't want to make, and then gutting them when they don't make all of the money. Or make more money than FIFA does, and FIFA just fucking prints money. Anyway, that was at a time when EA didn't really have much debt and has historically not had much debt. You know, it has been able to afford to make kind of games that don't make all of the money. Like the Haze-like games, you know, Split Fiction, It Takes Two, so on, arguably costs EA money to make. I mean, all the games cost them money to make. My point is that they don't make back their development costs, typically. Stuff like Dead Space, stuff like Titanfall, stuff like Mirror's Edge, those kind of games. The Star Wars Jedi games, they don't make FIFA money. Let's put it that way. They don't make Madden money. Potentially they don't make Battlefield money. I don't know. But that was at a time where, as I said, EA didn't have a ton of debt and typically was quite light on debt. And now it has $20 billion of debt and also has to hit interest repayments and also has to make a return on that $36 billion investment. So companies like Respawn Entertainment, who, you know, wanted to make Titanfall, have a lot of their prototypes cancelled, have a lot of games that they wanted to make cancelled, have been thrown into the Battlefield mines. BioWare has already had a number of layoffs because the Veilguard didn't make all of the money. And already had problems because of Anthem. New Mass Effect has been in development hell for a million years. Arguably, BioWare is just not the same company that EA bought. You remember the gutting part? A lot of BioWare's original devs, will say, not there anymore. There was some reporting that EA was looking to sell off BioWare at some point for around 800 million, some stage in 2007. Oh, sorry, no, it was acquired in 2007. Some stage in the last couple of years, they've been looking to offload BioWare, and that, I think, would probably be the best thing to happen to BioWare. To be sold to somebody else, or maybe buy themselves out. I don't know if they're in a position to do that. But if they stay with EA, or if EA elects not to sell them, I don't see them standing around. I don't see them remaining BioWare, basically. It's arguably that it's only a matter of time before BioWare is downsized further. So speaking with Mark Dara, who was formerly project director for a few of BioWare's games, and he's basically come down the viewpoint that the morality of the Saudi Arabian government versus the kind of games that BioWare make are kind of incompatible. It's hard to imagine that you have BioWare pivot from having very progressive messaging to having the reverse because it's what the government wants. Now, it's interesting. He doesn't necessarily specify which government, because do remember, Jared Kushner is also involved in this, and his father-in-law is, who he is, and the state of the United States right now. It's arguable you're not entirely sure which government he's talking about here. Anyway, it's hard to imagine that the public perception of a game that comes out of BioWare, even if you do that, isn't apocalyptically bad. So it's the idea that if BioWare do stick with them and have to toe the party line to make non-BioWare games, and remember, EA forcing studios to make games that they don't want to make has historically not gone well for that studio. Like I said, the best thing that can happen to BioWare is to be sold right now. Anyway, is arguably that there'll be a pivot away from human rights from the developers, not just game content, but for the people who actually work there. There will be no immediate changes to your job team or daily work as a result of this transaction. Now, the no immediate changes is arguably true because the deal won't be finalized until 2027. But once it's finalized, it's not really immediate anymore, is it? It's been like a year. Anyway, so amid concerns about the abysmal human rights record of Saudi Arabia, EA has stopped short of reaffirming its long-standing commitment to inclusivity. So remember, it just said there will be no immediate changes, not that we're committed to ensuring that this is an inclusive environment to work in, and so on. So some employees were speaking to Stephen Totodo for GameFile. It just shows how many people have been collateral this past year for executives to make out rich. Nothing feels great, and we know when the deal closes, it's going to get worse before it gets better, if better is even possible. Another employee, speaking to Kotaku, members of the Pride Employee Working Group are currently being very vocal about our concerns for our future. We're worried LGBTQ content will be deprioritized or cut entirely, and that LGBTQ and especially trans employees will be on the chopping block. A few of us feel heard right now. Again, considering how the US government is against queer representation and in particular trans people. Yeah, again, Jared Kushner's involved in this deal. I can't imagine it's going to go well. Anyway, we were talking briefly there about AI things. Anyway, so CEO Andrew Wilson said AI is the very core of our business. This was back in 2024 during one of the investor days at EA. But kind of concerning about that is the investor group are also thinking that generative AI can massively cut costs at EA. They're already talking about cutting costs. So investors are betting that AI-based cost cuts will significantly boost EA's profits in coming years. No, it won't. The deal is a huge bet that artificial intelligence can significantly cut EA's operating costs, allowing the equity consortium to manage a large debt load on a company that historically carried limited net debt. No, it won't. It just won't. It's not happening. The technology doesn't work that way. This is coming from people who have never had to use generative AI in game development. These are people who have only ever used it to answer their emails, which you can do fine, maybe, occasionally. But getting it to make a game or even help, it's not fucking happening. Anyway, speaking of how EA is currently kind of pushing their developers to use it, developers are encouraged to experiment with AI tools as much as they can. However, none have reported being forced to implement them directly into their workflows. It's probably going to change considering these quotes. AI is being incorporated into the customer service management, however. And if you didn't think customer service with EA could get any worse, hold my beer, I guess. So yeah, complaints would have ordinarily been routed to a human being. If it was routed to anybody, if it wasn't just fucking dropped. Anyway, now, however, complaints, they Their complaints may be routed first. God damn it, Kotaku. Their complaints may now be routed first to AI agents instead, which, yeah, it's not like EA are the only people doing this, but it's not exactly a great sign. Anyway, the Saudi deal is the second biggest gaming merger ever. The first, Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard, faced a surprising and prolonged level of scrutiny among regulators in the US and abroad, including their lawsuit from the FTC. We talked about that at the beginning, where Lena Khan was saying, I told you so, basically. But it's likely that this deal won't see any of the same scrutiny, because as one investor put it, what regulator is going to say no to the president's son-in-law? If you think having Jared Kushner attached to this is just coincidence, it's not. It's very much by design. Anyway, slightly better news. After layoffs, cancellations, and controversy, Zaum UK staff unionize as the Workers' Alliance. So if there's one studio that could really do with a fucking union, it's Zaum. So I think the workers at Zaum all agree that we have something unique at the studio that we want to preserve for years to come. It's a shame we didn't come to this agreement like 5 years ago. Anyway, so this is from the marketing manager. So Zaum's Workers' Alliance, which is the name of the new union, represents a subset of UK-based employees at the company. So it is important to point out that Zaum is spread across a couple of different studios. We do have the UK, but there's also another one in Estonia, and I think Italy is their third one. But they do have a couple of different studios, and it's only the UK one that is part of, well, this particular article anyway. The Zaum Workers Alliance is for the UK-based staff, and even then, it's only for some of the UK-based staff. The more I've worked here, the more I've realized that what we have is a unique makeup of people, and the union is a large effort to solidify that. This is from one of the UX UI designers. Instead of thinking about what the next year will look like, we'll be working together, taking what we've learned already and doubling down on that. Whatever that means. Okay, I want to play the games that this team makes. I want to play the games the last team made, sure. But anyway, so this is obviously coming off from the history of Zaum that we've talked about a number of times on the channel. Nearly 24 colleagues laid off early last year, which would have constituted about a quarter of the staff. Frustratingly, I didn't like hearing this quote, but it was like, they had 90 people on staff at the time. Layoffs was about 20 people. Were made redundant, but the studio is back up to 90 members. Why were they laid off? What was the point? You just. I mean, yeah, the point was to hire back people at a cheaper rate. That was really the point, or to juice their quarterly earnings reports or whatever. But like, you just fucking rehired them within a year. Like, it's so shit. Anyway, again, union. Anyway, I can't read that. Why did the highlighter make it white? The Independent Workers Union of Great Britain is going to be the umbrella union. You know, when we talk about it in the US, it's usually the Communication Workers of America. It's sort of the same thing. Is going to represent Zaum. In its recognition statement, so Zaum have recognized the union. Zaum's management has agreed to inform, consult, and negotiate with the union on key issues. I'd be curious if this includes CEO and so on, or if this is just the UK management. So yeah, they were talking about the fact that a recent survey at GDC said that 1 in 10 developers had been laid off in 2024. Which is literal decimation. So going back to the community manager, we believe, or the marketing manager rather, we believe a lot of that is because of the low collective bargaining power that workers have. So she says workers, but in general, and I mean, she's right for workers, to be honest. What I was going to say is that software developers and video game developers being a subset of them don't really have union representation. And it was largely due to the idea that software developers get paid pretty well. Historically, that is not really true anymore. And if anything, as you can see, 1 in 10 developers being laid off. A lot of the overinvestment in things like blockchain, things like generative AI, things like that. There is a coming mass layoff, really, of software developers, of tech industry workers in general. And without union representation, that's going to hurt a lot. So having that in place for Zaum anyway is going to be good. I mean, historically, just from Zaum, just looking at Zaum's history, you need a union, but also looking at the wider video game industry, 1 in 10 developers laid off just last year. Like, every studio should have union representation at this point. Anyway, in our case, we've had a couple of project cancellations and a set of redundancies, but I think the people who unfortunately did leave the company, that is an interesting choice of words, spurred us on to continue doing this and put the fire in our bellies to push us over the line. They didn't leave the company. They were laid off. It wasn't voluntary. You know, and that's just from the people who were laid off like last year. If we're going to go further back and talk about like the original writing team of Disco Elysium, who had the whole ongoing hostile takeover business, they definitely didn't leave voluntarily. They were forced out. So yeah, leave the company is, I mean, look, they're like a marketing communications kind of person, so they're going to be diplomatic with their words, but yeah, that's an interesting choice. Anyway, the aim is larger than protecting Zaum. We were seeing cancellations and redundancies all over the industry, so we really want to try and pave the path for other folks as well. And like, the more of these unions that pop up, the easier it will be for other unions to pop up. Like, they are an important kind of data point to look at. I think the rest of his article does kind of dive into the history and the whole Curvitz and Compass deal that we've gone over a couple of times now, and I don't think we need to do it again. But there was an interesting quote. Yeah, so he was here, and I thought this one was kind of interesting to point out because I've definitely been guilty of this, and I don't know, like, I haven't gone as far as they're gonna point out in the quotes, but like, you've seen me be a bit snide about their next game, right? 0 parades for Dead Spies, and I've been like, oh, you stole that from the other guys. Like, I definitely have that kind of thing, and I think this quote is kind of interesting. So the team is now working on the espionage 0 parades thing. They have faced years of hostility because of like the dark side of this fan support for Kurvitz and Rostov and the other key members of the original Disco team. So the thing is, when people are telling us to go kill ourselves, I'm the person reading that. Or when people are saying fuck management, I'm the person reading that. Management aren't the ones reading that. We talk about the fans valuing workers, but the abuse they're sending comes to the workers. So yeah, like, they are trying to make the best game they can make, or that I want to believe they are, and management are being shit about it. But also, when you get mad at whatever happened to Kurvitz and so on, and you get mad by talking to the fucking social media account and telling them to go kill themselves and what have you, why? Like, that's not like an email to the CEO. He's never going to see that. You know, being shitty to the frontline fucking customer service person isn't going to make its way all the way up to vice president of being a shithead. You know, that's not going to happen. They don't hear any of that stuff. Ever. If you want them to, you need to... Okay, don't go to them in person to do, like, find like their emails and stuff like that and send it that way. But... being shitty to the development team isn't going to help. They were not responsible for outing those people. They're just trying to do their job. They're just trying to make a game that they want you to play and enjoy. I don't know. I think it's just important to keep in mind that you take your grievances to the correct people, the people who you are actually angry at, and don't just be a Karen on social media. Anyway, moving on. Why would you want to have a union in the software development industry? Maybe because your studio closes down. Anyway, Avalanche is closing its Liverpool studio following Contraband's cancellation. So this was one of the games that was cancelled when Xbox did its mass layoffs. So Perfect Dark, Everwild, whatever Elder Scrolls Online people were working on, and Contraband was also one of them that was hit. So Avalanche, we're the studio that we're going to be making it. In light of current challenges to our business and the industry, we have thoroughly reviewed how to best ensure Avalanche Studios Group's long-term success, and it's by shit canning a bunch of people. So yeah, I mean, the funding has obviously dried up. They're not able to pay those people salary. Yes, they're using the same corporate legalese, business industry challenges, what have you. But the real thing is Microsoft pulled the money. And that's it. We can't pay your salary now. This will impact all Avalanchers, which isn't great. I don't like using, you know, the Amazon family kind of thing. I don't like using name of company and then ers at the end of it. It's always gross. Anyway, this will impact all Avalanche employees in Liverpool. The changes will also impact our other studio locations in Malmo and Stockholm, where we will reduce our workforce and restructure the teams to address our game's needs. So yeah, UK thing, they will have to have a collective consultation process because it's more than 50 people. So they haven't been laid off yet, but they're planning it. So it's basically to see what kind of severance they get. So if you're not familiar with Avalanche, they were going to work on Contraband, which I felt was going to be like a kind of mercenaries thing. We don't know. All we ever got was a CG trailer, and it was more of a teaser. But they are probably better known as the Just Cause games. That's what they made. So yeah. Casualty in Microsoft's widespread restructuring. I feel like I'm missing a game. I know, yeah, Perfect Dark, Everwild. There was whatever Elder Scrolls Online we're working on. Contraband. Was there a fifth game? I can't feel like there was a fifth one. Anyway. Speaking of new weird merger things, I guess, I don't know. Ubisoft's new company officially launches today. So this is, I don't know, it's kind of really more of a stub story, I guess. So this is following on from the news that Ubisoft was looking to spin off its best-selling IPs, we'll say. So it was looking to move Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six development to a separate subsidiary, which they're calling Creative Houses. But to me, it sounds like a creative way to steal IP from Ubisoft. So this studio is going to be called Vantage Studios, and again, it's going to take those three. So it's a new subsidiary company formed by Ubisoft and Tencent. Starts work today. It's Vantage Studios. It includes Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and the Rainbow Six franchises. Tencent currently holds a 25% stake in the new subsidiary, and some jobs for the boys as well. Ubisoft CEO Guillemot announced that his son is going to be CEO of the new studio. Cool. And like also we have this extra guy as Christophe Darren, which we talked about last time when the story came up, that he's arguably the guy who'll do all the work. And his son is there to keep it in the family, basically. So yeah, that's cool. Can't see this being a massive lawsuit in a few years. Moving on, so going on in the community, the Tosti guy from Mortal Kombat has left the studio after 30 plus years. So Dan Forden, some of you may not be familiar because we're going all the way back to 1993 here, has worked on basically every Mortal Kombat game, I think, since 30 plus years. It's a lot closer to 40 years, but he is the guy who pops up in the corner and yells Toasty when you uppercut somebody. And it had been in practically every Mortal Kombat since, in some way. Sometimes it's just an Easter egg. In the early games, it was almost every single time you uppercutted the guy, and then in later ones, I think it was only in particular stages that he popped up and this kind of thing. Anyway, Wednesday was my last day at NetherRealm. We made a lot of fun stuff over the years. I'm really proud of what we accomplished, as well as how much fun we had making that stuff. There are so many smart, talented people here. Look for more great things to emerge over the next several years. And they had a picture here where they have him in the corner of the mirror, and it says Toasty, and it's, it's fun. I wouldn't have lasted 37 years in the industry if fans weren't out there playing the games we made. Thanks to all of you supporting what we've done. Live long and Toasty. Toasty! Anyway. And it's slightly worse news, but also still Warner Brothers. Fortnite Peacemaker dance pulled over Nazi concerns following latest episode's big reveal. This is just what was inevitably going to happen when they just bastardize IP for Fortnite and just in general, where they just look at the character as a commodity or a mascot or anything like that, and they don't look any deeper to like, what is the major theme of the show? What does the character stand for? Is it maybe problematic to have them standing beside Mickey Mouse? I don't know. I know Mickey Mouse isn't in Fortnite. You know what I'm talking about. So the deal with it is, spoilers for the show. If you haven't watched this is your chance to get away from spoilers. Is that the current season of Peacemaker is set in a universe where the Nazis won World War II. And it is alluded to that maybe this dance, that when he flips his arms here like that it maybe looks like a swastika, and that's it. That's the whole deal. In and of itself, is it a big deal? No. It's one just fucking skin to be pulled, and even as it stands now, Epic are planning to just edit it and they'll put it back later. But this is more of what I was saying, which is, you're just looking at these things as dolls. You're looking at them as just like commodities to move around. You're not looking at any kind of artistic representation. You're not looking at any kind of deeper meaning to any of these characters. I mean, they had Darth Vader in there for Fortnite as well, who is also a fascist. Like he's the bad guy. And he's meant to be on your team helping you out. Like, that's questionable. And I guess the real question is what is Fortnite's age rating? Like, it's not 18s, right? Whereas Peacemaker, I think, is. It's like it's on late, or it's not on late. It's not on at all, that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know what the age rating for the show is either, but I feel like it's more than Fortnite. There's maybe a question that they shouldn't be in there. And it's like there's horror characters in there as well. It's like Jason, I think, was in Fortnite as well. Freddy, maybe thinking of something else. But they make sense in like Dead by Daylight. As much as I dislike that they use them in Dead by Daylight, at least they make sense in there. They're horror icons, whatever. But just throwing in whatever into Fortnite just cause it's popular, not looking any deeper than that, was inevitably going to lead to something like this. It was going to happen. As it stands, this is a pretty mild thing. I don't imagine anybody really made that kind of connection until articles like this came out. Like, I hadn't read the full article, and I just came down here, saw the GIF, and just looked at the dance, and I thought, it's a silly dance. Like, at no point did I think, oh, he's making a swastika fucking symbol. Like, I don't know. I didn't think there was much to it, but the kind of, I don't know, backlash kind of thing they're getting here is just a case of, hey, maybe if you thought about it a little bit, like at all, maybe if you thought about the character and what's going on in the show that you're doing a cross promotion of, if you paid any attention to it at all, maybe you might have spotted this. Anyway. That was your news for the 29th of September to the 5th of October, 2025. So yeah, pretty shit stuff coming out of Game Pass. And it's kind of somewhat alluding to what Xbox's strategy is going to be in the future. And I do think acquiring Activision is largely going to be seen as the beginning of the end of Xbox. Now, is this a hot take? Am I going to be eating my words in a few years? Maybe. But I do feel that it was so much money. And I do think, and I said it at the time, that I don't think they'll be able to ever really make back $69 billion in like quick enough for Big Daddy Microsoft to be happy with. Like, a lot of the changes that they've made to Game Pass, to Xbox strategy in general, has been because of that acquisition. Like, all of the, like, that's when they started putting their games on PlayStation. Like that's when it wasn't quite when the acquisition happened, but as soon as Call of Duty was about to hit Game Pass, they put the price of Game Pass up. You know, they took away the day ones on the regular tier. You know, they made that like significantly worse at the time. Now they haven't made that tier any worse now, but they've made the ultimate tier worse. Like it's only gotten worse over time, and it really has accelerated since that acquisition. And we can kind of see Microsoft's strategy going forward is to try to put Game Pass on as many things as possible, and maybe not. Again, it's a rumor, and they have said it's not true, but it might still kind of get the feeling it is true that maybe there won't be another Xbox. Potentially we'll start seeing Xbox branded things. We might start seeing Xbox. We've already seen Xbox branded handhelds. We might start seeing Xbox branded PCs. Xbox TV, maybe at some point. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's difficult to make the business case for another console. And considering Microsoft, I don't think they have the appetite for it. But we'll see. You know, we'll see. I could be wrong, and they do make another Xbox, and as it turns out, it's actually amazing, and so, you know, whatever. On top of that, then we had the EA being taken private, which, again, I'd said last week, that I do think going private would actually benefit them, but just not like this. Not as part of a leveraged buyout, not as part of a massive debt saddling thing, because the private equity leveraged buyout thing has historically not worked out well for the acquired party. You know, if you can find one where it has actually worked out well, let me know. But all I've ever seen are Toys R Us shut down, tons of restaurants shut down, tons of just general chain stores shut down. It might be the first one in video games, potentially. I don't know. So if it's not the first one, it's definitely like the most expensive one. And yeah, what usually happens is they get gutted and they take as much money as they can out of it. I've seen arguments going around that it's somewhat beneficial to them to keep it running because it gives them a kind of cultural power, in that, like, the Saudi Arabia and arguably Trump regime have an in on like the Madden games, like the FIFA games, Battlefield 6 and so on. It does give them like a way to like channel their ideals and their lack of morals to a base that may not be paying attention to the politics necessarily. So I've seen that argument going around. Maybe, I don't know. I do feel like money at some point does start to speak louder, and if they're pumping in 36 billion, they're gonna want that 36 billion back. Anyway, we'll see how it works out for them. Then we had the Horror Games Awards Halloween Showcase, which had no awards in it. Anyway, yeah, that was also a very long showcase with a lot of games on it. I tried to highlight some of the ones that I hadn't seen before that also looked kind of interesting. Not all of them are like, oh yeah, absolutely day one. Like, some of them are a bit ropey. And I'm kind of more curious to see how it works out. We had Zaum getting their unionized efforts good. It's a shame it didn't happen earlier, but good. And other things. I don't know. It's late. We need to go through it. Yeah, a bunch of other games in the updates. Earth Must Die look kind of interesting. Parasite, not Eve. Like, Square Enix, will you just fucking make another Parasite? I know there's a weird licensing issue. There's a reason they can't make any more, and it's also a reason why they can't release it again. But just fucking figure it out. Anyway, I'm gonna head off. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.